On the 24th of January 1948, inside of a prison in Poland, alongside many other convicted guards who worked inside of Auschwitz Concentration Camp, Heinrich Josten was brought to his execution. There were many evil guards who were executed on that day inside the same chamber, and there were a number of nooses hanging from the ceiling. The Polish executioner led Heinrich Josten to his noose, and within seconds he was executed and left strangling. There were thousands of men and women who worked inside of the deadliest concentration camp of the Second World War, Auschwitz, and a very small percentage of these murderers, torturers and executioners were brought to trial for what they did. But the Polish people wanted vengeance for the crimes that were committed inside of Auschwitz, and scores of former guards who were brought to trial were executed inside prison chambers for their war crimes and crimes against humanity. Welcome to The Untold Past. Join us today as we look at the execution of Heinrich Josten, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Heinrich Josten was born on the 11th of December 1893, and during his early life he trained how to become a locksmith. But like so many people in the 1930s, the politics of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party appealed to him, and he joined the Nazi Party officially on April 1st, 1933, and was within the first 2 million members. But Josten then went further in his ideological devotion, and in the same year he joined the SS, Heinrich Himmler's paramilitary group, which began as Hitler's bodyguards, and they then transitioned to become the feared guards of the concentration camps. Josten, when the Second World War broke out, also became a member of the Waffen-SS, and he was held in reserve, but he would be involved inside the concentration camps during the conflict, and not necessarily on the battlefields. Josten was first sent to Flossenburg concentration camp, and saw a period of training here before the war broke out, but in the months after he was then sent to Sachsenhausen concentration camp. It was within Sachsenhausen's walls that some prominent prisoners, such as Yakov Zhugashvili, Joseph Stalin, the Soviet dictator's son, was imprisoned, and he also succumbed to the sight, and over 50,000 people were killed at the camp. However, inside of Poland, Rudolf Höss was investigating the creation of the largest concentration camp, which would become the biggest site of slaughter inside of the Third Reich. Because Auschwitz expanded to a huge extent, there was a need for thousands of guards to oversee different aspects of the camp, and this included the gas chambers and the crematoria. Heinrich Josten was in June 1940 transferred to go and work inside of Auschwitz, alongside many other guards who moved from other camps, and to begin with he saw action as a commando leader, and he was overseeing work detachments, as well as processing the arrests of those inside the camp who broke the rules of the site. He also arrested and tortured prisoners who were involved in possible resistance at Auschwitz, and he gained a fearsome reputation because of this. Further promotions came for Josten, and he was made the commander of the guard team of Auschwitz II, and then Auschwitz III, and he was responsible for the behaviour and actions of the guards under his watch. Of course, many men and women brutalised prisoners, and women such as Irma Grazer and Elisabeth Volkenrath were known for their slaughter, and men such as Franz Hössler would ruthlessly execute prisoners as well as march them into the gas chambers. Josten was also made the head of the weapons and equipment department inside the commandant's offices, and he was in control of acquiring weapons and ammunition for the guards, and also the exterminations of many. Josten within Auschwitz was known for his violence too, and he was very hostile towards the prisoners, and he was regularly seen beating prisoners with his hands and other weapons, and he also oversaw SS men's beatings of the inmates. He enjoyed torturing and brutalising them, using flogging, and he was also involved in the public punishment which took place on the flogging posts in Auschwitz. 25 strikes from the whip were known to have been fatal. But one of the most ruthless jobs Josten took control of was that he was the protective custody camp leader inside the main camp, and he served under Franz Hössler, who became known as the hitman of Auschwitz. Josten was involved in this, leading firing squads and carrying out mass execution using gunshot. Dozens of victims and prisoners were led into gravel pits, where Josten's firing squads were ready, stood opposite, and they then fired their weapons into their victims. Josten personally gave the order to fire in hundreds of cases. During busy periods of extermination, such as when over 400,000 Hungarian Jews were deported to the camp, firing squads were used alongside the gas chambers at Auschwitz, as the camp could not cope with the sheer amount of people being killed. The crematories were so busy that people were just burned in open pyres. Inside of Auschwitz, Heinrich Josten was an executioner, a torturer and a murderer, who also drove prisoners to the gas chambers. He was seen carrying out selections inside of Auschwitz. As victims were sent to the camp, they were unloaded from the trains in the rail yards, and here SS guards and other members of staff, such as doctors, selected who lived and who died immediately. Those who were not fit enough to work inside of Auschwitz were sent to their deaths within the gas chambers, and they were driven straight to their deaths almost instantly. Josten was involved in this process, and he was involved in forcibly moving prisoners into the gas chambers. As the war turned against the Germans, there was a need to evacuate Auschwitz, as there was a fear that the Soviet Red Army would overrun the camp and discover the true horrors of the site. With this, many SS guards were moved to other camps, and Josten was sent to work as a commandant and camp leader of the Bulka Kaserne subcamp. This was part of the Mittelbau-Dora complex, and during the time in which it was open, around 3,000 prisoners died because of the terrible conditions. Thousands of inmates were sent to the site towards the end of the war, and the conditions of the site were horrific. There were no bunks, and if prisoners could sleep on anything, they only had a thin layer of straw, and things were very overcrowded. The rations were not enough to sustain anyone, and prisoners were just left to die. There were toilets, but they did not work because of a lack of water, and some inmates were so weak they could not move. SS guards neglected the prisoners and left them to simply die from the conditions, and it was referred to as a living crematorium, as the death rate was so high at the site. It was Josten who was overseeing this, and he was the commandant of this camp, the man who was most responsible for it, along with his other guards, and the camp was liberated by the Americans in April 1945, but Josten was nowhere to be seen, and he was actually inside of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, where he had run off alongside other guards. He was arrested at the end of the conflict, and he was then sent across to Poland to stand accused of crimes against humanity and war crimes for his actions inside of Auschwitz. He was tried as part of the Auschwitz trial alongside former Commandant Arthur Lieber-Henschel and other senior guards such as female guard Maria Mandel, and Josten was regarded as a rather high-up official inside the camp. He was found guilty of his crimes and was noted to have been involved in many selections, which then resulted in the slaughter of thousands of people. Following his trial, he was sent briefly to Montelupich prison inside of Krakow to await the death sentence that had been passed against him. Josten was, on the 24th of January 1948, informed that his death sentence was to be carried out immediately. He was one of over 20 guards who were condemned on that very day inside of the execution chamber of Montelupich prison. There were a number of waves of hangings in which many guards were condemned at the same time en masse. Inside the execution chamber were a number of meat hooks in the ceiling, and from these dangled nooses, and Josten was helped into the chamber, and an executioner led him onto a stool, which was placed under one of the nooses. He quickly secured the rope around Josten's neck, and almost instantly the stool was kicked out from underneath him. He slowly strangled to death alongside the other guards hanged with him inside the execution chamber at that time. Heinrich Josten was a senior SS official who inside of the group went from being a locksmith to someone who was capable of carrying out murder and torture with his bare hands. He rose to be the commander of his own camp, but the conditions of this site were responsible for the deaths of many people too. Josten was a brutal man who also carried out the executions of many, with him giving the order to shoot victims as he oversaw firing squads inside Auschwitz. He was a very senior figure inside the deadliest concentration camp, and because of this, he was sentenced to death and was executed inside of a prison's execution chamber. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.